A very warm welcome to everyone on the third day of our International Capacity Building Program, Gender and Cultural Studies, Pedagogy and Research. Under the visionary leadership of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Ratan Singh, Jagat Guru Nanak Dev Punjab State Open University is scaling new heights of excellence. Although our university is in its foundational years, having been established just 5 years ago, the university team has consistently added new feathers to its cap since its inception. Our academic portfolio continues to expand with a diverse range of UG, PG, certificate, and diploma programs. Furthermore, I am delighted to share that through the dedicated efforts of our Dean Research, Dr. Navleen Multani, and our esteemed faculty, the university has officially announced the commencement of PhD programs from January 26. We look forward to your continued cooperation as we strive toward even greater milestones. In our pursuit of excellence during this capacity building program, we aim to bring the most distinguished experts to our participants to foster collective growth. In this series, we are privileged to have with us today Dr. Nishi Pulugurtha. Welcome, ma'am. It's an honor to have you. I shall now share a brief bio note of our distinguished guest. Dr. Nishi Pulugurtha is academic author, poet, editor, and translator. She is head and associate professor in English at Brahmanand Keshav Chandra College, Kolkata, with several academic publications. Her writings include a collection of essays on travel, Out in the Open, an edited volume of essays on travel across and beyond, 3 volumes of poems, The Real and the Unreal, and other poems, Raindrops on the Periwinkle, Looking, a co edited volume of poems, Voices and Vision, the first IPPL anthology, 2 collections of short stories, The Windowsill and Framed, an edited anthology of short stories, the Virasat Anthology of Short Stories, an edited volume of critical essays, literary representations of pandemics, epidemics, and pestilence, a volume of essays written during the pandemic, lockdown times, a co edited volume of translated short stories from Indian languages, Bandaged Moments. Her book on food is forthcoming. She has been writer in residence, Samyukta Research Foundation, Trivendrapuram. She is the secretary of the Intercultural Poetry and Performance Library, Kolkata, advisor, board member of Alzheimer's and Related Disorders Society of India, Calcutta chapter, and was the chief editor of Antonyms magazine. Welcome, ma'am, and now over to you, Dr. Pulgurtha.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Dr. Kumar. It is a pleasure to be on this online research dissemination series that has been organized, and I extend my warm gratitude to Professor Ratan Singh, the Vice Chancellor of Jagat Guru Nanak Dev Punjab State Open University, Patiala, and to Dr. Navleen Multani for inviting me to this series that you have thought of, and it's such a wonderful series that you have come up with. Thank you once again for making me a part of this series. What I'm going to do today in my talk predominantly is, my talk is titled Invisible Disabilities, Gender and Representations. And since this series of research series is talking about research and pedagogy and women's issues, so and gender as well, so I will be trying to incorporate all the 3 of these in my talk. The major part of my talk, of course, will be focusing on the idea of invisible disabilities, with particular reference to the volume that Mr. Mohan just now mentioned, Bandaged Moments. I'll be talking a little bit about that as well, quite a bit about that as well. I would like to begin this talk by two small quotations. One from a story that most of us have read. As students of literature, we read this story, which is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, where I just read this line, I quote this line: I think sometimes that if I were only well enough to write a little, it would relieve the press of ideas and rest me. And this idea is something that is often spoken about by psychiatrists and counselors, of how writing is a kind of a catharsis, a stress reliever. The other quotation that I would like to begin with is from a poem by Emily Dickinson. And the lines are: the soul has bandaged moments when, too appalled to stir, she feels some ghastly fright come up and stop to look at her. An invisible disability is a physical, mental, or neurological condition that is not visible from the outside, yet it can limit or challenge a person's movements, senses, or activities. Unfortunately, the very fact that these symptoms are invisible can lead to misunderstandings, to false perceptions, and judgments. Often people think of the term disability, when they think of this term disability, they only think that it refers to people using a wheelchair or a walker. But a disability cannot be determined solely by whether or not a person uses some assistive equipment. The term invisible disability that I use in my title refers to symptoms such as debilitating pain, fatigue, dizziness, cognitive dysfunctions, brain injuries, learning differences, and mental health issues, as well as hearing and vision impairments. They are called invisible because they're not obvious, always obvious to the onlooker, and but can sometimes or always limit daily activities. They range from mild challenges to severe limitations, and they also vary from person to person. Also, someone who has a visible impairment or uses an assistive device such as a wheelchair or a walker or a cane can also have invisible disability or invisible disabilities. For example, whether or not a person utilizes an assistive device, if they are debilitated by such symptoms as I have referred to above, they live with invisible disabilities. There are thousands of illnesses, disorders, diseases, dysfunctions, congenital disabilities, impairments, and injuries that can be debilitating. Therefore, all of these conditions that are debilitating are taken into consideration when we talk about invisible disabilities. Since this series of lectures focuses on research as well, I will just take this opportunity to briefly refer to two areas that interested students and scholars could look up. One is the area of medical humanities, and the other is disability studies. Medical humanities is an interdisciplinary field of humanities that includes literature, philosophy, ethics, history, and religion. It includes social sciences, so it could include anthropology, cultural studies, psychology, sociology, and of course the arts, which means literature, theater, film, multimedia, visual arts. And not only the field of humanities, social sciences, and arts, but this particular field of medical humanities also talks about the application to how these various fields of study can be applied to healthcare education and practice. So, given the interdisciplinary nature of medical humanities as a field that encompasses the social sciences as well, medical humanities narratives may include fiction, poetry, art, social medicine, and so on. While academia has seen huge strides in medical humanities in the past 2 decades, globally, the scale is still weighed towards studies of humanities in medical education. The importance of medical humanities is dual in that it opens up medical text to literary analysis, and it opens up literary texts as representative of a history or historical consciousness. Medical humanities is also able to incorporate a wide range of theoretical paradigms outside of its focus on the body. So, it could include theoretical paradigms of class, gender, race, and disability. Disability studies has always coexisted with health humanities, with medical humanities. While the focus of the medical humanities has been disease, which is located within the body, disability studies has almost always concerned itself with other people's notions of ability and inaccessible physical spaces. Disability scholars do not agree with the older medical model of disability, which assumes the perspective of physicians and the medical model. In other words, now we are more focused on individuals who have lived or on experiences or on representations of disability in literature. So, the biological materiality of the body is susceptible to a finite number of constructions. It is also worth remembering that most of our culture is socially constructed along the material medical model to begin with. So, the lines between these two disciplines, medical humanities and disability studies, are blurred, where chronic illness can also be considered as a disability experience. The confluence of these two disciplines is more useful, with medical humanities garnering the attention of physicians to bring changes in the healthcare industry, and disability studies able to redirect the chain so that it better serves the needs of patients, especially patients with disabilities. I foreground what I have to talk about, my conversation about my book, with reference to these two particular theoretical ideas, because I do understand that several people who have most of the participants, many of the participants might be scholars and who might take up these areas later on, or who might want to take up these areas later on. And I use these two to foreground what I want to talk about. The book that has just been referred to a little while ago, which is called Bandaged Moments. The reason why I will be talking about this book has been edited by Nabonita Sengupta and myself. The book has just been published in 2025. It is a volume of translated stories, stories which have been written in several Indian languages by women authors. So all the writers of all the short stories that make up this book are women authors. They have been written in 17 Indian languages, various Indian languages. There are 26 stories in this particular volume. And what is important, apart from the fact that they're all written by women, is that these stories are all based on the theme of mental health. And mental health issues are an important part of invisible disorders. That is something that cannot be seen. It's also a part of disability studies, because mental health issues are also a part of a kind of disability as well. So I will be focusing on this particular work and what exactly is the thought and the idea that went into making this particular book. So there are several mental health issues. One could give a long list of them. They are, say, for instance, paranoia, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, panic attacks, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, mania, eating problems, hoarding, depression, borderline personality disorder, hearing voices, post-traumatic stress order, and the list goes on. There are several others that could be brought under the purview of mental health issues. It's also important to remember that mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. There is no PPT, it's just audio presentation. So mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, how we act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and make healthy choices. It's very important to note that both mental and physical health are equally important to the well-being of individuals. The term mental health, N. Subha notes in her essay, which is published in the Samyukta Indian series on Gender Studies, Women and Health, Volume. She notes in that particular essay that the term mental health itself is a misnomer, And the reason why she refers to it as why she calls it a misnomer is because she says that we cannot separate mental and physical health and confine them to different watertight compartments. She notes in that essay that there can only be one state of health which has both mental and physical aspects. The WHO, the World Health Organization Expert Committee, defines mental health as the capacity of an individual to form harmonious relationships with others and to participate in or to contribute constructively to change in a social environment. George Engel notes of a biopsychosocial model that speaks of the general well-being, behavior, and disease that happen to an individual. Labels such as disturbed, nuts, freak, psycho, spastic, crazy, mental, these are words which are very often used very randomly. The word insanity, for instance, could have a whole range of meanings depending on the way the word is used to refer to. So it is with the word crazy. Younger people often use these words to speak of something mind boggling, something surprising, but they could also refer to something that does not fit with the norm or is the other. Fear and stress are common responses to threats, to our responses to the unknown and the uncertain. This was seen when the COVID-19 pandemic was raging. You know, each of us have lived through that, so we know how things could be. The fear of becoming ill, the fear of falling ill, of the way in which our lives would change, of the various restrictions of the virus fixing its hold on individuals. All of these troubled each one of us, and we had great difficulty in adjusting to a very different kind of a worldview. As the pandemic raged, it brought immeasurable changes in the lives of people. The restrictions of working at home, of the difficult spaces that many homes are, of unemployment, of financial crisis, of the way in which education of children was being affected, of the loss of physical contact. The list could be more. It's a long, long list. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has made us more than aware of the idea of mental health. Mental health in India it's something that we don't often engage with, more so in India. There is a stigma attached to issues of mental health, and it is because of this that most often it is kept under wraps, never to be spoken about. Cultural and societal concepts and beliefs affect the way mental health is defined, and such issues are addressed. There is no one way in which they could be defined or described, and the ways in which they could be judged or determined as norms are different depending on the culture and the society. So, mental health issues therefore create problems and difficulties for an individual. They affect relationships, both within the family and outside it. They affect how one functions professionally. For young people, it affects their performance and behavior at school or at college or at work and with peers, and causes a withdrawal from everything. It's interesting to note that, in spite of the neglect and stigma that is often seen with reference to mental health issues in India, that there are references to mental health issues in ancient India. So it's not as if this is something very recent or of recent time. There is an essay on focus on psychiatry in India that was published in the British Journal of Psychiatry, which notes, and I'm quoting from that essay, that says the medical compendium of ancient India are replete with references to mental health, covering a spectrum of diagnosis, classification, and treatment methods. A description of insanity, Unmada, dating back to 1500 BC, exists in the Atharva Veda, the most ancient authentic Indian medical scripture. Descriptions of conditions similar to schizophrenia and bipolar disorder appear in the Vedic texts. These texts differentiated doctors practicing magical medicine from scientific physicians and surgeons who lived and practiced in cottages surrounded by medicinal plants. This is the quotation from that paper I referred to. However, mental health has been mostly neglected, not spoken about or discussed. It is only around the late 20th century that non-government organizations began to work in the area of mental health. This is also the time when support groups dealing with mental health issues began to work in the area. Support groups usually consist of family members, of caregivers, of people who have mental health issues. Yet, issues of low budget allocation to healthcare, stigma, the reluctance to seek medical help when required are still of vital importance even to this day. It is imperative to seek medical help and to consider mental health issues in the same way as physical health issues. Professional help in the nature of a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor are important. At times, a family doctor or a general practitioner might be able to guide an individual in the right direction. The seeking out of the right kind of help is the first step in dealing with mental health issues and is of utmost importance. Along with this comes issues of acceptance as well. Mental health awareness programs focus on stigma and discrimination, create awareness among family members, work towards acceptance, sensitization, and treatment of these issues. A lack of knowledge and awareness poses a detriment to treatment and care. There are not many studies available that speak of mental health in India. Now, I go on to talk about mental health and literature. Mental health issues have been the focus of writers over the years in a variety of genres. Every culture has its own engagement with mental health and has negotiated with it through literary expressions. As a genre that is concerned with a brief dramatic moment or a single episode or character, the genre of the short story allows for a brief yet potent presentation of incident or incidents and characters. One of the reasons for the choice of the genre of the short story in our in this particular work that we worked on, Bandage Moments, is our specific interest in the genre as practitioners of the form. Both of us, Navonita Shengupto and me, we have published anthologies of short stories. In an essay called A Writer's Look at Literature, Fiction, and Mental Health, the well known author Shashi Deshpande writes of the American poet Anne Sexton, who was asked to write poetry by the doctor who was treating her depression. This is my favorite quotation, which talks about mental health and writing. And Shashi Deshpande writes, and I'm quoting, it's a long quotation, but I would like to read the quotation. She writes, even with my little knowledge of mental illness, I am sure that such integration is important to the person's mental well being. Working with experiences, plumbing into memories, the writer is confronted by things she or he had refused to look at, things she or he had refused to accept to face. It has been said that writers are the only sane people in the world because they're able to get rid of much of their emotional burdens in their writing. I'm not sure if this is true, Deshpande writes. I'm sure it is a writer who said this. But undoubtedly, writing provides a kind of catharsis which helps the person to move on. And here is where the quotation ends. Shashi Deshpande, in this particular essay, goes on to speak of how fiction is not about oneself, of how various ideas, images, people, and an intellectual rigor in the case of a novel come together to create a work of fiction. However, there is often an element of truth in fiction as one writes about human nature, human behavior, and characters who inhabit the fictional world. As academics, one of the first stories that come to our mind when we are talking about mental health issues is the story by Charlotte Perkin Gilman's called The Yellow Wallpaper. A story that is part of the curriculum at the university where I teach. It is part of a paper on women's writing. And it's a story that I have been teaching for quite some time now. Prescribed in a paper on women's writing for students majoring in English literature, Gilman's story is a first person narrative that presents a woman suffering from depression and the so called treatment prescribed to her by the doctor, who also happens to be her husband. Her condition deteriorates while her husband and others around her trivialize it and speak of it as something that will soon pass. She is told to do nothing, just take a rest, because she's told that reading and writing and talking about it would worsen the situation. M and the Big Whom by Jerry Pinto is a novel about a woman who has bipolar disorder and about her family, and it is set in 20th century Mumbai. The novel is told from the perspective of a caregiver, and the work takes one through the lives of the characters with great empathy and sensitivity for those who have mental health issues and for their caregivers as well. Sepia Leaves, another novel written by Amandeep Sandhu, is a novel that is set in the 1970s, the times of the emergency, and is the story of the young protagonist growing up and coming to terms with his mother's schizophrenia. I refer to these two works by Indian writers to show that there have been engagements with mental health issues by Indian writers as well. One of the reasons that we editors decided to come together and work on this project is our interest in mental health. As I have closely seen a loved one be, my mother had Alzheimer's disease, so I have been the caregiver to my mother for several years. She had Alzheimer's disease for 11 and a half years. And here I need to mention that Alzheimer's disease and dementia are not mental health issues, they are neurological issues. But then they have several behavioral manifestations, often involving depression. And Nabunita also had an interest in mental health issues, because of which we decided to take up this subject and its representation in Indian literature, specifically the short story in Indian languages. Not only that, we decided to focus on short stories written by women, as the health of women is never a priority in the Indian scenario, and also because women are more conditioned to silence than men in this regard. Culturally, a woman is brought up believing that she comes last, and that it is the family that it is her family that needs to get the priority. An important aspect of mental health is self-care. We were keen to explore how women authors dealt with this subject. At a time when gender theory accommodates a range of identities into it, our focus on women writers could be called into question. But we believe that women's writing in this area that we have chosen may offer new ways of engaging and negotiating with the subject and with gender in general. We floated the call for translations for published short stories in Indian languages written by women on the theme of mental health sometime in 2021 during the pandemic months. The pandemic was still on, and there were lots of discussions and engagements with mental health issues that began to come to the fore. It soon became clear that as we began work on this area, as we floated the call and reached out to various people in the hope of getting translation, we soon realized that this was a very niche area that we had selected. One, the stories need to have been written by women authors, and two, the subject of the story, the crux of the narrative needed to be on the issue, on mental health issues. So very soon it became very clear to us that this was not an easy task. Initially, when we began the work, we decided to only incorporate stories that were written in the 21st century. So we're looking for modern stories. However, we began to understand that restricting the time period would not work. So we decided to do away with that time frame. We decided to incorporate stories by women authors which had been published at any point of time. We had very few expressions of interest, and it almost seemed as if this project would turn out to be a difficult task. We also we couldn't find enough stories. Sourcing the stories has been a very difficult task, and there was a point of time when we looked up the Sahitya Academy list of awardees to get in touch with women authors. And when we looked at that list, we found that women authors were a minority, and that list would not be much of help. We continued with sharing the call for the translations in various fora, reaching out to those who knew we were interested in translation, who were interested in women writing, in gender studies, or who could lead us to people who would be interested. The selection of stories also posed to be a problem, as we realized that there was a lack of awareness regarding what exactly constitutes mental health. And very often we got stories on physical abuse or women's exploitations as being categorized as mental health issues. Undertaking this project, then, for us is also a form of activism that will help us to reach out to a larger number of people regarding awareness of mental health issues. Such a collection of stories from various languages and dialects might also encourage authors to come forward and write more on similar issues as well as on other taboo topics. Um, the oldest story that we have in this particular volume is the Marathi story Taj Mahal, written by Kamala Tilak, which was included in a volume of short stories published in 1932. This story portrays a young woman who has mental health issues, whom most people think of as mad. They call her pugly, they call her crazy, and they shoo her away. But what is interesting about this story is that in 1932, this author, Kamla Tilak, not only presents a young woman who has mental health issues, but she also presents the way in which society deals with such a person. And her presentation is one that reveals a very deep understanding of mental health issues in the 1930s and how some empathy helps and how the stigma and the way common people behave leads to tragic circumstances. So, in spite of the fact that it is written in 1932, the story is still relevant in the 21st century. It still makes sense. You still understand the very empathetic way in which the author has dealt with this issue. It's a very very relevant story, and possibly we would not have been able to source this story had it not been for the writer's granddaughter, who actually got in touch with us and who translated her grandmother's story for us. The translated stories in this volume speak of the various issues that one knows or has heard of, but finds it often difficult to engage with and even more difficult to accept. The stories are set in urban and rural spaces. The protagonists and other characters in the several stories reveal an ignorance, an awareness of the problem, a difficulty in understanding how to deal with them. You find characters who want to give up. You find characters trying to overtly control. You find characters and situations trying to deal with issues of empathy, of trying to bring about an ableist representation as well. So there are certain stories where you have humor being used as well. The translators of these stories, there are 26 stories as I mentioned, and all the translators are both men and women, and some of them are experienced translators, some of them are occasional translators, many of them are first time translators as well, and each one of them bring the essence of the stories to the fore. If language be the vehicle of culture, literature is its representation. Therefore, each linguistic community has its own set of literatures which represents the culture or the way of life of a particular community. A community maps, records, and disseminates its experiences through its own language. And here in this volume, through the several stories written in so many different languages, we hope that we have been we can actually give you a represent give writers give readers a representation of the way in which the issue of mental health has been dealt with. um, Translation, of course, plays an important role in the intercultural exchange of such literary representations. And in a multilingual society like India, translation has a much greater significance. So, this volume of English translations of short stories on mental health by women writing in various Indian languages is driven by a similar purpose and is significant because it helps to bring together stories from almost the whole of India. We don't have all languages, but we have several of them. From Kashmiri in the north to Malayalam down south, from Rajasthani, Hindi, or Marwari in the west to Assamese in the east. This helps us to bring together within a single cover diverse ways in which women authors have spoken or not spoken about matters pertaining to mental health. The taboo that surrounds discourses of mental health also become manifold when it concerns women. The gendered structure of language in many ways impacts the process of articulation. There is an essay called Gendering Translation, Translating Gender, a case study by Meena T. Pillai, where she notes that that in most languages, such stereotypical differences are often enlisted in the service of patriarchy to privilege male sexual identity. This can also be extended to the silence of around the mental health of women. Yet it cannot be ignored that this is a significant aspect of our social existence and needs to be brought under discussion. This book, Bandaged Moments, is an attempt towards that direction. To understand the nuanced world of mental health and to create an atmosphere of empathy. The shortest translated story in this volume is called Girl in the Dollhouse, a Kashmiri story, which is just 947 words. While Glass Walls, a Tamil story, is the longest one in this volume, with more than 8,000 words. And Glass Walls is a very, very powerful story, a very disturbing story of a young boy. And how his family reacts to his mental health issues, which is diagnosed, and you do find the very common way in which a family reacts to it. And this, mind you, is a story set in an urban setup with educated people, and you see how the stereotypes, how the prejudices around mental health issues still prevail. uh, those stories less than 1,000 words are generally considered to be a short story or flash fiction. We have made a deviation in the case of the Kashmiri story because we wanted to have a representation from the Kashmiri language, and also because the relevance of the story to the theme under consideration. In spite of the very short span of the Kashmiri story, which is titled in English as The Girl in the Dollhouse, effectively communicates the vulnerability of a mentally challenged woman and how it makes her physically susceptible. Some stories included in this volume, such as Glass Wall from Tamil, Flying Fish from Assamese, deal with clinical schizophrenia. So there are stories in some stories, where the mental health issue has been diagnosed. There are other stories like Story of Laughter, which is from Bengali, The Tale of a Toilet from Kannada, Mind It Madhurya, which is the original is a Magahi story, RX Marriage, a Telugu one, and Convert My Bad Karma to Good, which is a Hindi one, which treat various kinds of mental health issues that involves going to a medical practitioner or a counselor. So the stories in this anthology have different themes, have different ways in which the theme of mental health is presented. So we have these stories where you have characters going to see a doctor, going to see a medical practitioner or a counselor. The Malayalam story, Incomplete Pauses, narrates the state of a woman in an asylum and the helplessness that she faces when she is released. Mental health is also a social issue and involves discrimination, stigma, and silence. When it concerns a woman, it even leads to sexual exploitation. This issue recurs in multiple stories included in this volume, highlighting the greater vulnerability of a mentally challenged woman. The Maithili story, Oh My Benefactor, the Doll's House, the Kashmiri story, the Punjabi story, Innocent, all of these have as their central protagonist a mentally challenged character. The figure of a mad person roaming around the neighborhood is quite a common scenario in localities in India. While the story Bleak Noon, a Bengali story from Shilchar, explores the pain that gives birth to such characters, Taj Mahal, the Marathi story, explores a similar mad person one meets at a popular tourist destination like the Taj Mahal. Obsession is another behavioral condition that impacts the mental well being of an individual. And stories like Vicious Cycle, which is translated from Gujarati, The Smell of News, a Malayalam story, Breaking Out from Urdu, Borderline, a Bengali story. Each of these stories, some of these stories which I mentioned, are some of the stories that deal with obsessive behavior. Yet, it is important to note the treatment of the treatment of obsession is very, very vastly different. Crazy River, an Odia story, is the story of a woman losing her desire to talk due to trauma, while another Odia story, The Shadow, narrates the gradual degeneration of a woman in terms of her mental health. The Urdu story Yellow Rose speaks of the isolation that often becomes part of the lives of those who have mental health issues. One of the stories that subverts the role of the doctor and patient with tongue-in-cheek humor is the Hindi story. The original one was written by Mridula Garg, and the translated one is called Beyond the Cruel Times. Considering past women's own words about the roles as healers, medics, and patients that they have occupied, and their experiences of ill health, disease, and treatments, can help us contextualize and critically evaluate the experiences of women in our present context. It would be of interest to examine the central place women had in not only performing healing, because women as caregivers, women as people who care for somebody who is sick, is a very common, is a kind of an stereotype. It's a kind of an expectation that that everybody has. But it would also be interesting to examine the central place that women have in shaping and critiquing medical understandings, framework, and standards of care, and intellectual discussions about the natural world. And we strongly believe that storytelling fiction is a wonderful way to present issues which are important, about which we need to have serious dialogue, so that these stigmas that we are talking about um, slowly will be erased over a period of time, and mental health will not be looked upon as a kind of something which is out there, or something that is looked upon with stigma or with taboo, but would be dealt with in the same way in which that we talk about any kind of physical ailment as well. And I think it would be very interesting, and there has been quite a lot of work being done in these days in the areas of, as I mentioned right at the beginning, disability studies and medical humanities. I see quite a number of young people having interest in these areas, particularly when it comes to work for their PhDs. And I hope that this a different way in looking at text, exploring new ideas, new vistas, to bring together these issues which are so much a part of the world that we live in, and to talk about their representations in literature, is something that would be of interest and would work. And as I said right at the beginning, we think of this work as a work of social activism as well, because the moment, and for the past few months, we have been talking about this book at several places. Last month we had several book events in New Delhi, and I was really very happy. We were really very happy to see the way in which young people, students, were responding to the book. While most of them had not read the book, yet they were responding to the idea of mental health. And I think that is something that medical humanities, disability studies, and our book focuses on. I'll end here. Thank you so much. In case you have questions, comments, I'm more than willing to answer.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the enlightening lecture. Now, over to the participants. If you have any query, any question regarding the lecture of ma'am, or you have anything to add, or your observations are also invited from the side of the participants. Any question, any query? I think most of the listeners are quite satisfied and they have no question at this
I have
time.
one question, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Pooja
Yes, sir.
Agarwal from
Yes, yes.
Nurse.
Very,
Welcome,
very
ma'am.
good afternoon, ma'am. Really very insightful, insightful session today. because very less talk about the mental health and mental health issues. Nowadays, we are really facing. I think most of the person are facing this issue, but nobody is talking about mental health issues. We are talking about the physical health, which is visible. But this, I think, we can see that this is very, very important to how to resolve these issues. This is very, very nowadays, because mental, I think physical challenge, physical health is main factor is related to mental health. If we feel mentally fit now, then we can present ourselves physically fit. So this session is really very means knowledgeable also today.
Thank you so much for saying that. That is what we strongly believe. This is the cover that you can see on your, I don't know if you can see it.
Hanji, ma'am, stories of mental health.
Yeah. So this is something that we have strongly, very strongly felt, and I have seen this as well, that as you very rightly point out, we don't have any problems talking about our physical ailments, but we think of this part as something separate. So we don't talk about
Absolutely.
it. Right. So we need to normalize it. And also we need to work towards removing the stigma. We need to change the language in which we, use when referring to mental health issues.
Absolutely.
Very often we say that somebody is mad or she's pagal hai. Right. We
Hanji,
use it
absolutely.
without even thinking what it is. I mean, who we say that she's not normal. Who decides what is normal and what is not normal? So this is something that each of us have to work in order to bring about this change, because just as you have so many different kinds of physical ailments, you also could have, it's the same thing. It is again a question of chemical imbalance in your body. So it is about how we deal with it, how we talk about it, and it is important that we engage with it on a daily basis so that we are able to care and make things easier, convenient for everyone, and remove that taboo that we have. Right. And
Yes, ma'am. This is nowadays means session is required. This type of session is very much required at every place. Now, not in every educational institutions also, even in our schools also,
true.
because students has faced this type of problems nowadays. So I want to quote this: there is no health without mental health.
True, absolutely. Very true. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Can I speak? Can you hear me?
Yes, Rama Kulkarni ji.
Yeah. Thanks, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you. Ma'am, it was quite engaging. The lecture was kind of engaging. I couldn't help but think of Leena Benare from Silence the Court is in Session. Again, a translation of a Marathi play, Shantata Court Chalu Ahe. And also in the initial part of the lecture, when you mentioned, I was also reminded of Sylvia Plath, So the fact that this is a very global kind of an issue, and the fact that as many times it has been basically voiced, there seems to be very less interest taken, So somewhere, I think we as women should, in some sense, start creating some sort of awareness. And your book definitely, is a fantastic effort towards it. The fact that you brought all these stories together and you table it, in a wonderful way. So uh, just a round of applause and appreciation for the effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ramaji, for saying that. I didn't bring in Sylvia Plath here because the earlier talk that I had given for the university, I did speak about Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath, so I didn't want to. But Plath is a favorite, and particularly the way in which she's talking about the issues that trouble her. I mean, she's very powerful in that. And as
Exactly.
I said, Yes. And as I said, sourcing for us also, sourcing these stories have been very, very difficult. At one point of time, we thought the book would not happen. It was only in
Yeah.
2023 end that we more or less thought that we had, because unless and until you have a substantial volume of stories, you cannot bring out a book. And we also
Yeah.
realized
Yeah.
that when it comes to women's writing, many of these stories, many of the work that women have done have not been anthologized, have not been archived. So many of them have been lost. So suppose you write a
Oh.
woman writes a story in some magazine and the magazine goes out of circulation, and it's difficult to source those stories. The Marathi story, the old one, we got it simply because the granddaughter of the author decided to translate and share it with us. But that is what
Yeah.
something
Yeah. Yeah.
we have learned, while working on this
Uh,
project.
uh,
We've learned that
uh,
women authors, it's difficult to get themselves published. Many of them don't want to get themselves published as well, who have written maybe one story, but one powerful story, and that story is lost somewhere. So, and since you are working at this center, I thought I would bring this up because I think this is a common thing when it comes to women and writing. Thank you so much for your negotiation with the engagement with the topic.
yeah. Yeah. The title also is so apt. Bandaged moments. The fact that they are invisible. The selection,
Yeah,
the choice of your words is extremely appealing.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yes.
congratulations on that.
Thank you,
Yes.
thank you. That of course is a phrase taken from Sylvia Plath's poem. So, as we were
Yeah. Yeah.
studying, one of the things the publisher had told us that we needed to give a very long introduction, a 5,000 page introduction, 5,000 line word introduction. So while studying for
Mhm.
that, you're reading literature, and one of the first things that I read was Emily Dickinson, and that is where we
Mhm.
found that phrase bandage moments, and we decided to borrow it from Dickinson because I think it wonderfully expresses this issue
Yeah.
so very well, where it is hidden and kept away from sight, not spoken of much. Thank you.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Nishi, for your insightful lecture and bringing the silences or voicing the silences, I would rather say. And it takes some grit and courage to tell the stories, to translate the stories of the bandaged moments, and especially when it comes to women writers. And again, a lot of appreciation for the translation work, that is. And I'm sure, ma'am, that earlier also, whatever you have been writing, because I keep reading about the things that you are publishing, I know some sequel is going to come. So
And
maybe,
Naumika has one session with you, so she will be concentrating more on the translation and gender bit
yes, yes,
in her talk. So we've kind of divided our duties.
yes,
So to
yes.
speak, yeah.
Yeah. So I was really wondering, maybe next year again, a part two, maybe with a new title, but the story remaining the same. Yes. And this is a stigmatized area, which many people don't talk about.
Right,
As
right.
Dr. Pooja was also saying, yeah, yes, because it's not only, you're assessing the physical, but the mental health and mental well-being is very important. And when you were talking about the catharsis that writing has, and how these narratives can enable us to understand the nitty gritties of the thing. So any more questions? Over to Dr. Vinod.
Uh, Thank you, ma'am. I just want to state that after listening Dr. Pulgurtha, now I wish to read all of her writings. Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Pleasure.
Uh, Now I invite to Dr. Pooja Agarwal for the formal vote of thanks to our distinguished
Yes.
speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We sincerely thanks to Dr. Nishi for insightful session on our mental health issues. Her thoughtful reflection, practical guidance help deepen our understanding of emotional well-being. We truly appreciate her valuable time, expertise, dedication to this sensitive subjects. I especially thanks to Dr. Multani for organizing such a wonderful session on our mental health issues, and I also thanks to our participant and dear faculty member, and especially thanks to Dr. Vinod for convening all these sessions very well. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure being part of this session. And I may not be in Patiala with you, but my thoughts are definitely. Thank you so much for making it.
Thank you, ma'am.
And again, the
Just for a
request.
moment, now I would like to request all the participants to switch on their cameras so that we can have a group photograph